The first question I have is, what are the biggest challenges in developing robotic-assisted systems for spinal procedures?
We do not develop robotic assistant. What's the word used? Systems. We develop medical device systems. Our medical device is hardware based between tools and implants.
But what would be the biggest challenges?
Ensuring that the intended use is proven. So the intended use of the device is proven. If our intended use is to, for instance, ours is to help patients with scoliosis, that we can prove it. Ensure that we follow regulations and have proof of all that, following those regulations. What's your other?
So that's probably like a regulatory quality standpoint. And then from a research and development standpoint, it's making the best device you can and one that performs the best. So doing iterative designs to make sure that your device is performing as well as you want it to. There's everywhere in the industry they do fatigue testing to make sure your device lasts for the intended number of cycles.
Yeah, exactly.
And you don't want the device prematurely breaking.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of analysis and improvements that are put into those devices to make sure you're getting what you want.
But how do you guys test that? Like, if it's the fatigue testing?
So a lot of bench testing is done first, so laboratory bench testing. Depending which regulatory body you want to market your product in the United States, you have to do animal testing. In Canada, that's not required. Depending on the classification of the device, anything classified of class 2 and above requires clinical trial on human patients. So the proof is throughout all those testings, all the research and development, which includes, again, bench testing all the way to in-human, prior to the ability to submit any submission or application for market approval, depending on what regulatory body you plan to market in, whether it's in the United States, Canada, Europe. Their regulations are completely different.
Oh, okay, yeah, I didn't know that it was different per country.
It's different per country. Europe, there are many countries who follow the same regulations. There are some who don't. The UK, obviously, they've exited out of Europe, so they have a different regulation. Eastern Europe is quite different with, Poland and have different regulations as well. It's not as standardized, or they are actually rather very standardized, but not similar to what the EU EMA, so European Medical Association, and the FDA is different, Health Canada is different. Again, FDA requires animal studies where Canada does not.
Oh.
Yeah. And then, Asia is a different market as well.
Yeah.
Completely.
And for bench testing, if you want to test something, there's usually a standard that defines how to test it, and they give you, they outline
rules.
You call them rules to follow. But yeah, it's pretty much.
Right. So in any testing level, there are rules and regulations that you have to follow, whether it's bench testing, animal testing, human testing. Animals and human require ethics committees to ensure humane ways of doing things are being done, and the safety of the patients, whether they're animal or human.
What happens if you don't follow the rules? They just you can't use the device?
First of all, you won't get marketed. That's one of the items. Secondly, you can be prosecuted.
Oh yeah.
You can be prosecuted. You could be jailed. You can be, depending on the country, you could be beheaded, like in China. So yeah, there are big rules. There are, you can get arrested, you can get prosecuted.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very, very regulated.
Strict.
It's very strict.
That slide that you showed the other day, how the rules came into effect and how it wasn't standard. So that would be a cool slide
to show him. Yeah. So, yeah, I could do that. You want me to get that now?
No, it's okay.
Okay. So over time, over history, starting back in 1903, many when certain devices and or pharma was introduced to population, they learned through that history and trial and error of what worked, what didn't work, and why certain rules had to come into effect, whether it was because there was deaths that occurred, poisoning that occurred or whatever. And you can see that history through many documentations on the web or whatever, why certain rules came into effect. And it really dates back like centuries.
Okay.
Yeah.
How does AI or computational modeling play a role in your research?
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
We should get one of the guys to answer that.
Yeah. I mean, we can give like a basic answer, which I think will suffice. They can go into a lot of detail because that's what they do for
A living.
Yeah. But basically, bench testing can get very expensive. So having it model on the computer, they don't. For the tests that we're doing with them, doesn't really involve AI, but they'll simulate using finite element analysis. So they analyze the stress that's on your product without actually testing and breaking your product. Because a lot of testing is destructive testing. So being able to test it on a computer before you actually test your product saves a lot of time and money.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And right now, our company, our subsidiary, Numelogics, is in the process of getting one of their computational modeling simulation software approved by the FDA to use as a testing model for a specific product, which I'm not going to go into detail right now, in order it to be the standard of care across the board. So we're like innovating, we're a company that's innovating and trying to be the trailblazer within the community of computational modeling in order to get a standard out there using our product.
Do you think that at one point in, let's say, in scientific development, that you wouldn't have to use human testing, that at one point AI could test it for you?
That's a really good question. We don't get the choice as to whether or not that's sufficient. AI cannot determine how a patient will react.
Yeah.
When we do clinical trials, there are formulas of how many patients need to be to give us a justified output. And depending on what the test is, it could be as easy as only 20 patients, or it could be over 200 patients, where I've worked on different types of devices where that range was there. And I could tell you, in a clinical trial, patient 1 and patient 20 will react differently. Every person is different, and they just want to standardize that by doing, they do analysis of all the patients and then what the overall consensus is and everything like that. Can AI give you that? Right now, I'm going to say no. They cannot give you that. We cannot determine what that every patient is going to be the same, because they won't. And in my opinion, AI is a learning machine, and when they start learning how things react, they give you an output of 1, right? I don't know AI enough, but you won't get that in clinical research. You don't get the same outputs for everybody.
But if different, let's say a medical device in clinical trials that, let's say 5 patients, they react 5 different ways, how can you say that the device is productive or efficient enough?
So you'll have a protocol, and the protocol will determine what is required as an output. The output will have a range.
Oh, okay.
And depending on what is it that range is, it's biostatistics, right? So depending on what that range is will depend how many patients is required to get a consensus, basically. And if the device you make requires, for instance, for scoliosis, the device will treat a patient with a curve angle of, whatever, 20 and 50 or something like that. One patient with 20, one patient with 50, and like how many patients in between will determine that their success rate of that device may differ depending on the range of their curve. So the biostats portion of it, we hire biostatisticians who will take all that data, crunch it and everything, and state what the success rate is.
Okay. Yeah. And
the success rate will be, the end point or the labeling of our device will state, exactly that. This device can be useful for patients from this age to this age, this weight to this weight, this curve angle to this curve angle, with a success rate anywhere between this and this. So there's no fixed amount for everybody. Again, not everybody's the same.
Does there have to be a success rate minimum to make it go on the market?
That's a good question too. It all depends on your product, all depends on your reviewers, all depends on your country.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, so obviously they want what the intended use of the device is, what you're stating the intended use of the device will be, and how you achieve that intended use, and what is the percentage achieved. I've worked for companies where 67% was adequate, where I worked for another company where 67% was not. So it all depends on the device, depends on everything.
Okay. Where do you see the future of robotics, in spinal care in the next 5 to 10 years? Like in terms of scientific development or evolution of science?
Well, that I don't know. You go there.
Well, already, I think even what Numa is doing, getting a model that they're using to be credible and to be accepted in the eyes of the FDA to be used. For example, there's testing that we can do, FDA, so models that'll simulate how your device is gonna react under a certain load. So those tests might not be recognized by the FDA, but with the development of new tools, it could push the FDA to allow those models to be recognized. Mm-hmm. So with new technology comes with better calculations of certain properties, certain higher computing powers. So with that comes better results and more credibility because of the better results that you're able to prove.
But you're asking where you see it in 5 years. I could tell you what they're doing right now to get this approval. We're going on to year 2, and it's not there yet. So it takes time.
Yeah. 5 years, I think, in medical devices is a very short period of time. Yeah, it's a very short period of time. If you say 30 or 40 years, maybe there's going to be a bigger noticeable difference, but 5 years,
We've been working on our device for 7 years, and we have a good 4 or 5 years more to go.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the reason why medicine, like your pharmaceuticals, and granted, in Canada we don't pay for operations, but it costs money. It's because the companies are trying to recuperate the 5, 6, 10, 20, 25 years that they took to get to this point.
Do you think that with the advancement of science and new technologies comes new rules?
Absolutely.
New ethical rules?
So, absolutely. So, regulations improve over time. They get, there's always new revisions, and that happens all the time. When we notice in industry that the regulation doesn't work, a lot of the government, whether it be Health Canada, the FDA, or in Europe or whatever, they will host a industry group session to discuss what we see in the field and what is not written in the regulations, and through that become draft regulations where they get distributed amongst the industry folk who are in communication or who are on a working level with the regulators in order to come up with the best way of improving all of the regulations moving forward. For instance, in 2018, I went to the FDA as an industry standard representative to discuss the merge of two regulations, one in Canada and Europe and one in the FDA. And that was in 2018. Today we're 2025 and it finally got implemented. So that's how long it takes for those communications and those things to get to the point of regulations.
But if it takes that long, then let's say does science evolve faster than like the rules per se?
Yes, but sometimes you have to prove you have to have scientific proof in order to change the rules. But scientific proof cannot come from one individual or one company or one division of the rules, because you'll notice if you do some research, you'll notice that certain standards are, for instance, for engineering, but it could be, or even for medical device. But a class 3 device could be anywhere from a hip replacement to a heart stent to a screw. The sternness of those regulations may not be necessary for one as it is for another. So they have to come up with something that it can be interpreted well for all types of devices.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not that easy. It really isn't.
Like, if you develop a model that simulates, for example, hip and knee replacement, this AI model says that it'll last, with your lifestyle, it'll last 10 years or 50 years, 60 years. They're going to ask, well, where's the data to prove that that's correct? Now, to get the data, that takes time. So you might have the model, but it's not an approved model until you get the data to back it up.
Right.
So that could be a part that takes a lot of time.
Yeah. And I can tell you where what he's saying is accurate in a sense where, so that you've heard of hip replacements, right? Well, they've just come up with, and I don't even know if it's available yet, shoulder replacement with the exact same type of concept where they have that ball and
articulation.
Yeah. But your nerve endings, your muscles and everything differ from here to your hip.
Yeah.
So regardless that it's almost the same concept, they have to put all of that into the equation in order to ensure that it works as good as they expect it to work. It's closer to the heart, it's closer to the arteries.
But how can they put that in the same basket if the hip and the shoulder don't do the same things?
Exactly. How can they do that? So they create a regulation. They create regulations that are very vague and up to interpretation based on your device. And then you have to take that regulation, interpret it, and give proof that you followed it, and still create the intended use of your device. It is not an easy science, but smart people do it, and it gets done.
In terms of medicine, how do you see the role of surgeons evolve with the development of robotic machinery?
Yeah, that's good. The one thing that we as industry folks wish there was more is the education of those things that get evolved, including regulations, at the early stage of their education, basically in schools. We spoke about this recently. I gave a course to the team recently about quality and what quality means. And I think 3 engineers already told me, I wish we learned this in school. We only had maybe a 1-hour class on it. Nobody taught us more. And then they come into the industry and then they're bombarded with these SOPs, so standard operating procedures, not understanding, we have to follow these rules all of a sudden. So my hope is that this gets to a point where they start teaching this early on in their education. Robotics, there are robotics right now already, so there's the Da Vinci. That's a robot that does surgery via mechanical hands and everything like that. the companies that created these robots, by regulation, have to teach the doctors before they're allowed to use it. And a lot of times the industry have these training protocols where they have to see so many and do so many before they're allowed to do it alone. So that's where it is right now, where there's a training protocol depending on the level of difficulty. They have to pass certain levels before they're allowed to go on and become what's considered an expert in that robot. Yeah.
Another thing, like technology, when we say a technology, like right away we think AI and computer modeling, but technology could be something simple like 3D printing a part for a surgeon to hold and get used to the instrument before they actually use the real thing. So they're able to give their feedback on something before it's actually produced, and that in itself brings a lot of value.
Yeah.
So something very, very minor that we don't think as a really like big technological marvel today, because 3D printers, they've been out for some time now, but they're still relatively new, and they bring so much value to our work and a lot of industry work.
Yeah. So training and training protocols are regulation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because every time you say technology, I think of AI or like my phone or stuff like that. I always think of like electrical or all like data and stuff like that. I don't think of the machinery behind it.
Yeah. Machinery, like you said, we have a 3D model of a bust of a human with the ability to do exactly what we want our device to do, and we've had doctors come here and actually pretend, let's say, and test out our device using these models. So that's considered part of their training.
Okay. Because like that's like I went online on your webpage, I think, and I looked around and I read the word Survision TM. I didn't know what that was, and I was wondering like what that is and what are the challenges behind developing technologies like that.
So our Survision product is a class 1. So in devices they're classified. So class 1 is low risk. For instance, your toothbrush is a class 1 device. It's used to clean your teeth, right? It's a device. Regardless what people think, it's a device, but it's the lowest risk device you could possibly have. However, you'll know that children's toothbrushes have bigger handles, they'll have technically softer bristles, and that is part of a regulation because of the sensitivity of young babies. Our Survision is a class 1 device, positioning device. What it is it's a device that positions a patient in a way to access their cervical spine to take an x-ray. What they do right now, for those people who don't use our device, they use tape, surgical tape, and they'll tape down the neck, they'll tape down the arms, and that's the standard care, because technically they don't really need to stretch out the neck, but when the doctor wants to see, the C6, C7 spine, it's very difficult to see it unless you stretch out the neck. Using surgical tape is what they discovered, this works and we can see it, but the surgical tape at the end creates rashes or burning or whatever. It's not comfortable. We invented a positioning device that allows them to do that with soft material. It's just a soft material strapped on the patient. It stretches their neck from their shoulders, and they're capable of getting that x-ray. So that's what that Survision device is. TM means it's trademarked, as opposed to R registered. And that's our class 1 device. Our class 3 device that we have here is not on the market yet. We're still in the testing phase. Like I said, we're going on year 7 or year 8 in our testing phase, and it won't be on the market for a while.
How many different classes are there for devices?
Oh gosh, there's class 1, class up to class 4, but then there's class 3A, B, class 4A.
But is it like in terms of more dangerous?
Yes.
So class 4 is a more dangerous device you can create?
Yeah.
But what is dangerous entitled? Like
For instance, a class 3 device, our device, we're implanting screws and a tether on a child's spine, right? You can nick their spinal cord while doing the implant. You nick their spinal cord, they're paralyzed, right? So that's why the training comes involved, right? The other class 3 device, class 4 device can be stents that you put in the heart. You don't put it properly, your heart's your ticker, right? You don't, that doesn't tick, you're gone. So that's the danger. Class 2 devices is you just have to prove that there are other devices that are on the market, still works. It's not it's not hard. One of our devices that is a class 2 device is the actual screwdriver that they use to screw in the screw, right? It's a tool. It's not implanted in the person, it's not done anything. Other class 2 devices can be
but just to give
to make it very uncomfortable for you, a class 2 device is a tampon. Okay? It's
Class
a device.
2. But how is that not class 1?
Because it inserts in the body and it stays in the body, and it could cause, and there's a warning on the box for toxic shock syndrome, right? Okay, you don't know that, you're boys, but it can cause death. A tampon can cause death if not used properly, because you can develop a sepsis.
But a toothbrush can also cause death?
You just brush your teeth, you don't leave it in your body.
Okay, but if used incorrectly, it could.
How?
If you stab someone with it?
Yeah, but that's something, that could be anything,
Yeah,
right?
okay,
Yeah, that could be anything. I'm saying if the intended use, used the way it's intended, it won't be dangerous. A tampon, if used as intended, can still be dangerous.
Okay, yeah. The last one I have is, are there any research areas that you believe are currently unexplored in spinal biomechanics?
There's so many people researching different things. It's a really, really big field. If there's a stone that's unturned,
I'm pretty sure it's going to be unturned any minute, you know.
Yeah, there's so many universities that are studying different technologies with the spine. For some things like we can't even think of yet. So obviously we don't know what the future is gonna hold. But for what we know, for what's out there, there's people looking at pretty much everything there is.
And to give you an example, in the Netherlands, most of their research is what they call investigator-led, and that means a doctor will be working and realize, you know what, I've been doing this for so many years, this is an improved product, but you know, this can be better. And then we'll approach a company, the company, let's say, that they've worked with all the time, and say, listen, this can be better because I'm seeing patients with XYZ. If you did, ABC, then we can improve their life. And through a lot of investigator-led studies, new devices come about. And it means that basically the doctors see on the daily things and want to improve things. The president and the owner of this company, one of the founders of this company, he's one of those. He was a trailblazer in getting this, what we have working right now.
But yeah, so I think AI, everyone's talking about AI right now, and getting a simulation of how a patient's going to react to your device before you even insert the device, maybe something that's in the future is going to be well developed and will work well and be credible enough to be used instead of actually implanting the patient and just see what's going to happen. But just that on its own, it's going to take a long time to develop, but it could be that it's the future.
That doesn't happen from yesterday's thought process tomorrow the market. It doesn't happen that way.
So you always you have a research, you always build on it to create new things. There's always les racines, or there's always a base.
Not always. Sometimes it can be just
stumble upon something.
There have been medical breakthroughs based on someone's diagnosis. Like, for instance, Lorenzo's Oil, right? I don't know if you've seen that movie. That's an amazing movie to understand how something came about because parents of a child that was sick were determined to find a cure for their child. Obviously, you'll do anything for your child when they're given a life sentence of death due to illness. And they were capable of finding a plant in the Amazonia or something like that and created this, what they call Lorenzo's Oil, and then a pharmaceutical company picked it up, and there you go. So if you want to see something to that effect, watch Lorenzo's Oil.
It's I've never I've always thought science, because I've always worked in science. I always thought it was something so theoretical, but I've never explored it in the experimental type of way.
That's how it starts, right?
Yeah.
Very experimental.
The
theories come through experiments.
Yeah. Well, I had just one more question. It's not nothing with this. I was just wondering,
yeah.
What